Welcome to Fort Niagara. Hope you've been enjoying it so far. My name is Private Gerst, and I'm in the 1st Artillery Regiment of the United States of America. My job here was to basically bombard Fort George, about 3/4 of a mile down the river. I'd like to say we did our job pretty well. If you go visit Fort George now, it's actually an entire reproduction. Yeah, it was an entirely wooden fort, so that means we fired what is called a hot shot at them. Hot shot is essentially cannonball heated up to red hot temperature, and when it hits wood, it catches fire. So Fort George being an entirely wooden fort, hot shot works very, very well. And even though Fort George has a little bit of a height advantage on us, we actually ripped the roof off of the French castle here, off that building, and this other stone redoubt over there. So we had a very elevated cannon battery as well. So we did have a very good advantage there. We did end up taking the fort. And then we decided to come back here. The Canadian volunteers actually burned the entire town of Newark over there. And as you can imagine, the British were pretty upset by that. So they retaliated and came and took Fort Niagara. We don't really know if they just kind of moseyed on in or if they actually knew the password to our gate over there. Because the soldiers back then, especially in the American Army, didn't get paid very well. About 16 cents a day. So to make up for that, they gave us a lot of alcohol ration. Yeah, so soldiers were constantly drinking, and we don't know whether the guy kind of just let him mosey on in or did pass it or not, because there wasn't really no big, huge punishment for drinking a lot, because we left it. So, I ended up coming in through there, took the Red Barracks, which is actually our hospital at the time, and actually took the South Redoubt, all by bayonet point. No shots were fired by the British. Kind of embarrassing and loss on our part. And to retaliate for the town burning, they actually burned everything from here to Buffalo, but not the fort, because they wanted the fort. Yeah, kind of sad, but that's war for you. But believe it or not, most of the deaths actually happened on this Niagara waterfront for the War of 1812. For War of 1812, you typically think burning of Washington, Battle of Fort McHenry, New Orleans, stuff like that. Actually, about half of it happened here, believe it or not. So, a little bit about that. The History Channel doesn't really talk about that too much. Too busy about trucks on ice or something. There's a little bit about that. Now onto my uniform. Like I said, I am part of the artillery regiment. So that means I'm covered in this nice yellow tape. So this yellow tape denotes that I'm an artillerist. And if I were infantry, this would all be white. Along with this hat cord that I have, that would be white as well. And this hat plate, if I were infantry, it would be more tin, but of course, being an artillerist, gold. So there's a little bit about that. The shoes that I would have been wearing are actually called straight lash shoes, and they would have been tied at this point. There are still buckle shoes around, but tied are sometimes a little cheap. So I would be wearing straight lash shoes, which means there's no left and no right foot. I have to break them in. A lot of times, armies would actually have you switch the shoes every day. I don't know why they would do that. It's just incredibly uncomfortable. And around my feet, I have what are called spatagashers, or short gaiters. These actually keep stones and or such as debris from getting into my shoes while on the march. Problem is, when something gets in your shoe, take it out. So that's a bit of an issue. The pants that I'm wearing, as you can see, they're very, very dirty. At this point, being an artillerist, they have to deal with large guns and gunpowder flies everywhere. These are actually made out of linen and held up by what are called braces. Braces are known in England today, still called braces, but in America we know them as suspenders. So that would have been held up by that. I'm also wearing a vest underneath my coat here, also made out of linen. I'm wearing my nice wool coat, as you can see. Very, very comfortable today. Very hot. I'm also wearing this linen or cotton shirt underneath, and I'm wearing this lovely leather neck stock around my neck. It's essentially a strip of leather that goes all the way around. It keeps me from looking left, right, down, and the sun keeps me from looking up. So, very, very uncomfortable. This is actually why the Marines are called leathernecks. They were the first ones to get rid of the neck stock. A lot of people think they're used for protection, but really it's just meant to make you look very robotic almost. Don't look left, right, forward, but mine's pretty broken, and so it's a little more comfortable. And this lovely hat that I'm wearing. Take a look at it. Seems kind of silly. It does provide a little bit of shade from this little visor, but other than that, there's really no practical use for this hat at all. It's to make me look taller and more intimidating. I don't know how well that works, but especially back then, because my enemy's wearing the same exact hat, The intimidation factor is gone. And now, the fashion statement. So, a little bit about that, about the uniform. Now on to the boomstick, the gun. Now this is a French model Charleville musket. It's actually the gun that the United States copied into the very first Springfield musket. Now the thing is with the Springfield is they don't work very well because it's the first gun that the United States ever really produced. And believe it or not, our reproduction Springfields don't like to work either. So that is why I'm using this gun today, because it looks exactly like the Springfield and just fires better. We also would have been using the infamous British Brown Bess musket because the British actually sold us the musket before the war started. However, as you can imagine, they don't really sell it to us during the war. So there's a little bit of an issue there, but we are oftentimes seen using Brown Bess muskets in the Army as well. So there's a little bit about that. Now, this is called a rifle. Oh, sorry, wow. This is called a musket as opposed to a rifle. Does anyone know the difference between the two? Has to do with the barrel.
Rifle in the barrel.
Exactly. There is no rifle in this barrel. Rifle has what is called rifling, and this rifling is essentially a spiral groove inside the barrel, spins the projectile, making a very stable flight pattern, making a very accurate shot. This, however, being a musket, has no rifling, making a very inaccurate weapon. See that cannon out in the middle of the parade field over there? If I fired this 5 times, probably hit that once. Yeah. I'll give anyone 20 bucks to stand over by the South Redoubt and let me shoot at them. I'll give you 6 shots. Guarantee miss every single one. So, a little bit about that. And that is actually why we stand in long lines and I'll shoot the same thing at the same time. That's why I see in old movies huge columns of soldiers taking turns shooting each other. It's not because they're stupid. It's because it's the only way to get these guns to work properly. So that is a little bit about the muskets. Now, we do have rifles back then. You may ask, why not use them? There's 3 good reasons to that. The first reason being that governments are cheap. They don't like to spend money on us, so they arm us with a less expensive musket. This is actually about 1/3 the cost of a rifle, and therefore you're able to arm a lot more soldiers with these. Now, this is also a 69 caliber bore, shooting a 64 caliber ball. It's a pretty significant difference. And the reason it is because there's this lovely black gunk inside the barrel called fouling that actually builds up every time I shoot my weapon. Now that builds up to the point where I can't shove a ball down it anymore. And because there's a difference between the two, I can fire about 70 shots before I actually have to clean this thing. With the rifle, because the ball has to be very tightly packed to the board in order to get the spinning action, I can fire about 10 shots before I actually have to clean it. This is a lot more battle efficient in those regards. Now, the 3rd reason we're choosing musket is because in 15 seconds, I can load and fire 1 single shot with this thing. With the rifle, it takes a full minute to load and fire 1 shot. So as you can imagine, this is a lot more battle efficient in those regards as well. So if we think about this, if there's a rifleman on the other side of the fort there, I'm shooting my musket at him and he's shooting his rifle at me, I can fire 4 shots at him in the time it takes him to fire 1 at me. So who do you think is going to die first, him or me?
You. He's got a rifle.
Yes, exactly. I'll miss him every single time. He'll hit me the very first shot, and it turns into a very bad day for me. And that is why we stick to linear warfare. All of these soldiers just taking turns shooting at each other. It just makes sense back then. So, a little bit about that. Now, on to the different parts of this gun. We have 3 main parts, actually. The first part being the lock, the second part being the stock, and the third part being the barrel. Lock, stock, and barrel. You've heard the expression before. It comes from the musket. This means you have everything ready to go and you can go off to battle. Now what we want to focus on right now is actually called the lock. The lock is essentially what makes the gun go boom, and it is called the lock because back at the end of the day, locksmiths were the only ones really smart enough to make these things. So 3 main parts of this as well. You have your steel frizzen right here, you have your pan, and you have what the British thought looked like a rooster. And that is why, excuse me, that is why to this day, we still cock back a gun. Excuse me. So, right now it's in the half-cock position. As you notice, if I pull the trigger, it's not going off. Nothing's happening. And that's actually good. This is called the half-cock mechanism, and my gun shouldn't go off in this position. It's the only safety mechanism we have on this weapon. This is how my commander has me test this. Now, the reason we have this is because we fire what are called muzzle-loading weapons. We load it on the front of the gun. If it goes off in that position, and I'm trying to load my weapon, it turns into a very bad day for me. And that is where we actually get destruction, going off half-cocked, because you don't want that to happen. So, when I do bring this to the full cocked position, you'll hopefully get a nice red-hot spark. Now those sparks should hopefully ignite the black powder we have in our pan right here, which should hopefully explode. And the explosion should hopefully carry through the little touch hole we have drilled into the side of the barrel, hopefully contain the main charge, hopefully building up enough pressure to send the ball flying in towards the enemy, but probably not hitting anything. Now, that should, hopefully a lot. This gun works about 70% of the time. Now, that's in the best weather conditions possible. This gun doesn't like to work in the rain, wind, sleet, snow, too hot, too cold, too humid, most days. So, given the current conditions, let's hope this works for you guys today. We actually would have called battles on account of the weather. It was like baseball. We typically wait for a nice, clear, sunny summer day to have a nice, organized battle. Today, yeah, it's a little humid out. Maybe not a perfect battle day, but we can still give it a shot. This gun misfired for me once today, but I assure you, if it doesn't go off in the first shot, don't boo at me. You can start booing at like the third, fifth shot, but I promise it'll work eventually. So, without any further ado, how would I actually load and fire this for you guys? So, what I'm going to do is reach into my cartridge box to grab a cartridge. Now, these cartridges have everything I need to fire my weapon. They have the powder inside of them, and they also have the ball. Now, the thing is, we're not really using a ball today. That can be kind of dangerous. We don't want to destroy the buildings or harm any of our guests. So we just use the black powder. But don't worry, you'll still make a boom. So, since my hands are full, how do you think I'm going to open this up? Exactly, my teeth. One of the requirements of the army was to actually have 2 opposing teeth. Or very strong gums, if you really care. So, bon appetit, I'll rip this open. And I'll spit that at my enemy to show my disdain for them. Then I will pour a little bit of the powder into the pan right here. I don't really want to pour too much into there because I don't want to burn off my eyebrows. I will then close the frizz upon the pan to keep it from blowing away, and so it doesn't pour out of my musket when I have to cast it about like so to pour the remaining charge down the barrel. Now, remember how I said the ball is significantly smaller than the bore? What happens if I point this downhill?
It's just gonna roll out.
Exactly, my ball will roll out. My enemy will see that. They'll laugh at me, and then continue to shoot me. So I want to avoid that by providing what is called wadding. That is actually why I send the paper down with the ball. Kind of adds some friction, keep it from rolling out. Then, I want to withdraw my rammer. And grab on my charge. Make it nice and tight. Then, I want to return my rammer, because this is my loading mechanism. If I don't have this, I can't reload my weapon. Yes, if I do leave it in the barrel, it'll make a lovely flying javelin of death. The chances are, a British shish kebab at the other end won't give it back to me. And as cool as that sounds, believe it or not, this doesn't fly so gallantly through the air into my enemy line. No, it really just flies helicopters, lands about 10 feet in front of me. So, I'm going to be sure to want to return my rammer and bring to the shoulder position. Doing this lets my commander know that I'm ready to fire. From here, he'll actually give me a few commands. At first, he will say, recover arms. You can bring it out in front of me like so. Next command will be make ready. I'll bring it back to the full cock position. And then he will say, take aim. Why aren't you laughing? Listen. No one is saying take aim at this time besides the Americans. And the British laugh at them for saying it. The British are simply saying present because the gun's so inaccurate, there's no point in aiming it. You just kind of point and hope you hit something. So, the British are saying present at this point, but of course the Americans are saying take aim, and then fire. Boom. So, I'll go through those steps, and when I say take aim, I'll count to 3, and say fire, and hopefully the gun will in fact fire. So, we'll try this. Recover, off. Make ready. Take aim. 1, 2, 3, fire.
You actually hit something?
Yes.
I don't think so. So, like I said, you can't really hit anything with this thing, right? So essentially the musket is a giant yelling match between the two armies. Your job is to get the morale of your enemy as low as possible. when you see that they're going to surrender soon anyway, you break out the most feared and most dangerous weapon of the 19th century, and that is the bayonet. Excuse me. Now, this bayonet is actually so feared and so deadly that after World War I, the triangular-shaped bayonet is banned from warfare entirely by the Geneva Convention. So we can't use these today, and yet we can use nuclear weapons. That's how dangerous these things are. So, the first reason that makes it so dangerous is if you notice the triangular-shaped blade that leaves inside your body, triangular-shaped hole, which is very difficult to sew up. Now, as you can imagine, we keep you very sharp, correct? Are we sharp enough to shave with, right?
Not quite.
Not at all! We would have left these nice and dull. Another reason for that, we attach these when we first get to battle. And so if we want to reload with these on, we don't want to cut ourselves. Plus, I don't know if you've ever tried cutting a steak with a spoon, but it doesn't turn out too well. It kind of rips the hairs apart. As you can imagine, a knife makes a nice clean cut. What would you rather get stabbed with? A knife or a spoon? A spoon? No! You would rather get stabbed with a knife. Knives make nice, clean cuts. Therefore, you're able to sew them up a little bit easier. Spoon just kind of rips and tears it apart. So if you think of this as a giant triangular-shaped spoon, you not only have a triangular-shaped hole, which is very difficult to sew up, you also have a very jagged-shaped hole, which isn't going to be sewn up at all. So you don't want to get stabbed with this thing. No! Let's add insult to injury. Remember all that black gunk inside the barrel? Since we fire with these on, it's now building up on the bayonet. And if you get stabbed with this, all of that black gunk is now inside your wound. Now gunpowder is made up of 3 key ingredients. You have charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter. You all know what charcoal is, right? You can sometimes drill with it. Sulfur is that yellow, smelly mineral. And saltpeter is also known as potassium nitrate. To get it, you're able to mine it back then. Or more conveniently, you can make it yourself. And to do that, you boil stale urine and cow manure together.
Ew!
Exactly.
Awesome. Gross!
So essentially, you're getting stabbed with cow poo.
Awesome! I want to get dirty!
No, you don't want to get dirty because there's no medicine back then. They don't know what germs are. There's no antibiotics. So, if you don't die from initial stab wound with this thing, you're going to die from an infection. And you can't really amputate this area, can you?
No.
So, you're pretty much out of luck then.
What about cow meat?
What's that?
Nothing.
Anyway,
Done.
when you see hundreds and hundreds of soldiers marching towards you with 6-foot pikes at about neck level, what do you think you're going to do?
Run.
Run!
Run away! Exactly! And that is what most logical soldiers would do. Of course, if you did stick around, you're going to be brave, you're going to be dumb, and those not fast enough to run away. So, typically, you just kind of march very slowly towards your enemy. It's not like Hollywood. You're not sprinting towards your enemy in some vicious bayonet battle. No, you're marching towards them very slowly to let them think about what's coming after you. Your goal is really not to stab them with this. Your goal is to make them run away because they know how incredibly dangerous these are. They have them too. So that is why the bayonet is actually so incredibly feared by everyone at the time. And typically, when you do see your enemy's morale is very low, you break out the bayonets, kind of scare them off the field. So the bayonets do typically end battles of the 19th century. However, today, they're very good at ending musket demonstrations. So, I'll be happy to answer any questions at all that you may have about the forge, gun, uniform, any personal issues I can help with. And if not, enjoy the rest of your day at Fort Niagara, guys, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.